What's the most horrible thing you've done? Story 1. All right, this thread has gotten pretty long, but I need to tell the world about this. My cousin and I used to spend vacations with each other's families. One year as a teenager, he met a girl and hooked up with her on the beach. Most people understand that vacation romances end when you leave, but she didn't. She kept calling, emailing, and messaging him about 15 times a day. She confessed her love for him and even talked about moving to Pittsburgh just to be with him. Obviously, this wouldn't sit well with his girlfriend back home. A couple of weeks after we returned from vacation, he and I came up with a plan to make her stop contacting him. One night, I called her and told her that he had been taken to the hospital due to a football injury. I said that a blood clot formed during surgery, traveled to his brain, and he passed away on the operating table. I may or may not have left this on her answering machine. The next day after my cousin left for school, his mom got a call from the girl's mother, offering her deepest sympathies for the loss of her son. My aunt completely lost it. She thought something had happened to him while he was driving to school. She immediately called my mom, and they had a huge argument with my cousin and me. In the end, I had to call and apologize to both the girl and her mother, explaining that what we did was completely wrong. That night, I sat down to call her again, this time in front of my mother, so she could verify that I actually apologized. But instead of calling the girl, I dialed my own voicemail. I then carried on a 10-minute one-sided conversation, crying and apologizing profusely. My mom was so convinced she started crying too, and that was that. We never heard from her again. My cousin and I still talk about it sometimes between ourselves, but nobody else ever knew. Story 2. When I was in second grade, I had a teacher who was 4 months pregnant. As a kid, I was always full of energy and loved running around the classroom during break. One day the bell rang, signaling that it was time to sit down. But my 2 friends and I kept running around, still playing. Suddenly, my teacher appeared in front of me, and I accidentally ran straight into her stomach. Hard. She winced in pain and told me she needed to talk to my parents. 2 days later, she called in sick, and we had a substitute teacher. A week after that, my mom sat me down and told me that my teacher had lost the baby. I never saw her again. I never really knew if what happened was my fault, but in my young mind, I believed it was. And that thought has haunted me ever since. Story 3. I don't know if this was the worst thing I've done, but it's definitely up there. When I was in high school, I put a firecracker in a friend's toilet. I don't know why, I just thought it would be funny. When it went off, it cracked the toilet in several places and water started leaking. My friend, who was a bigger guy, came to check out the noise. I quickly told him it was just the toilet seat dropping. He brushed it off and told me to get out because he needed to use the bathroom. At that point, I figured it was the perfect opportunity to escape before getting into trouble. About 10 seconds later, I heard a loud noise from the bathroom, like plates hitting the floor but not breaking, followed by an agonizing howl. The scream scared the life out of me. A few minutes later, he came out of the bathroom in his boxers, covered in blood. It turned out that when he sat down, the broken toilet completely gave out, and the jagged porcelain sliced him up badly. I never told him the truth. He assumed his weight was to blame, and from then on, he struggled with self-consciousness for the rest of high school. I still feel awful about it. Story 4. Back in my teens, I had an ex who was being horribly bullied by another girl. Wanting to impress her, I agreed to a plan she suggested. We hacked into the bully's PC and email, which was a lot easier back then. Through this, I learned some things about her and created a fake, perfect boyfriend for her on a dating site she had signed up for. She only communicated with him through email, and we could see from her messages that she had completely fallen for him. Then on my ex's birthday, I arranged for this fake boyfriend to stand her up in a crowded club, right in front of us, while she watched my ex have a great time. It was cruel. I regret it, and I don't blame my ex for talking me into it. What I do blame her for is lying. I found out later that my ex had been the original bully all along. Story 5. During my last years of high school, I was friends with a guy who was basically the laughingstock of the school. He was overweight, nerdy, and honestly a bit arrogant. But once you got to know him, he wasn't a bad person. We played Magic, The Gathering, and World of Warcraft together all the time. One day I decided to mess with him. I recruited a new player into our guild, someone from a neighboring town. Her name was Wendy. In reality, I used voice-changing software and pretended to be this girl. Over time, he completely fell for her, to the point where he wanted to move in with her after graduation. To make it believable, I created a fake MySpace profile with photos of a random, average-looking girl, adding mutual friends from both of our schools. He was completely obsessed. Then one day I just erased her, deleted the profile, stopped responding. She vanished. He asked about her for months, and I told him I hadn't heard from her either. He was crushed. This wasn't just some online fling for him. He was ready to give up everything for this girl. Eventually, I helped him move on and even introduced him to his current girlfriend. But looking back, I have no idea why I took it so far. The thought that I might have seriously messed him up for years still haunts me. Story 6. During a game of minnows and whales at a public pool, I decided to fake drowning. As I was being pulled to the surface, part of the game, I let my body go completely limp. I floated face down for a few seconds before someone dragged me out. They laid me beside the pool, panicking, while I kept my eyes closed and controlled my breathing, making it seem like I had stopped breathing altogether. Things escalated fast. Someone called an ambulance, and within minutes, paramedics arrived with sirens blaring and lights flashing. When they couldn't figure out what was wrong, I kept up the act, sporadically gasping, then holding my breath again. They decided to rush me to the hospital. It only took the doctor about 30 seconds to realize I was faking it. I heard my mom arrive and the doctor casually tell her, "He's just lying there with his eyes closed. Take him home." She took me home without saying much, and I never spoke about it again. Sorry, world. Story 7. A couple of summers ago, I had a 9-to-5 routine, doing an internship at a big insurance company. One morning while driving to work, I noticed a guy weaving through traffic, cutting people off, speeding at the worst times. He was driving like a complete maniac. At the next red light, I ended up a few cars ahead of him in the next lane. Feeling petty, I decided to mess with him. Every time he tried to change lanes, I blocked him off. I kept this up for a few kilometers, making sure he couldn't get ahead. Then we hit another traffic light, and I finally saw where he was going. He pulled into an emergency animal hospital. He didn't even park properly, just left his car and ran to the back seat. That's when I saw him lift his dog, who was clearly in agony, and rush inside. The worst part? My window was open, and I could hear the dog wailing in pain as he carried it inside. I still think about it. I don't know what happened to that dog, but I'll never forget the sound. Story 8. When we were kids, my sisters used to make fun of my little brother because he was a bit overweight. He always turned to me for support because I never joined in. One day, while visiting them, my sisters made a comment about him, something impulsive and, in the moment, undeniably funny. Without thinking, I laughed. My little brother was standing in the doorway, about to go outside. He heard what was said about him and saw me laughing along with them. I saw the look on his face. I will never forgive myself for that moment. The other thing I regret deeply is how I treated my grandmother's gift. When I was around 11, she gave me a collector's doll. At the time, I just shrugged it off, not realizing how much it meant to her. Years later, I learned that she had saved for months to afford it because she didn't have much money. She passed away later that year, alone, while my family was on vacation. It took 2 weeks before anyone even found her. I will never forgive myself for not showing her how much I loved her when I had the chance. Story 9. This isn't the worst thing I've ever done, but even now I still think about it and feel bad. When I was in my early teens, my mom and I never got along. We fought constantly and I was always grounded. One time after she grounded me again, I waited for her to leave the house. Then I snuck into her room, grabbed her favorite music CD, her only CD, and scratched it all over with my nails and some keys. Once I was done, I put it back exactly where I found it and left like nothing had happened. Months later, we were on a road trip playing music in the car. My mom put in that CD and it was completely ruined. It wouldn't even play 10 seconds without skipping. She just sighed and said, "Oh, looks like my CD isn't working anymore." I really like that one. I felt awful. I still do. Story 10. The worst thing I've ever done was tell my mom I never loved her. I did and still do love her, but she had said something extremely hurtful to me, and in that moment, I wanted to say the most painful thing I could think of. It worked. She burst into tears and ran out of the room. I ran out of the house and stayed at a friend's place for 2 days without telling anyone where I was. I just didn't want to face her. Even after I came home, my mom and I didn't say a word to each other for days. I talked to my dad, but I avoided her completely. Every time I think about it, I realize I should have just told her how I felt instead of saying something so cruel. I can't get the image of her face out of my head. how it scrunched up as the tears welled up in her eyes. It still hurts to think about. Story 11. Okay, so here's a pretty messed up story. The summer after my freshman year of high school, I went on a school-sanctioned trip to Chile and Peru. There were about 15 of us, including a bunch of my friends, so it was a great time. Near the end of the trip, we were staying in a small hotel in Cusco, Peru, which sits at an elevation of about 11,000 feet. After unpacking, we had no scheduled plans, so everyone was just hanging out and unwinding. I was sharing a hotel room with two of my friends. After a particularly hilarious series of events, which I'll elaborate on if anyone ever asks, two girls from our group ended up locked inside our bathroom. At first it was funny, but I wasn't feeling great because of the altitude, and I suddenly realized I really needed to use the bathroom. Since ours was occupied, I went downstairs to the girls' room to use theirs. When I walked in, one of the hotel staff members was still tidying up. We hadn't been there very long yet, and some of the rooms weren't quite ready when we arrived. I smiled at him and went into the bathroom. As soon as I lifted the toilet seat, I noticed the water level was unusually low. I was suspicious for a second, but quickly thought, I'm in Peru. Their toilets must work differently than the ones back home. Well, I went ahead and did my business. A lot of business. Then I flushed. That's when I realized the toilet had been clogged the entire time. The water kept rising, and I was horrified as I watched it overflow. Within seconds, brown, murky water was flooding the floor. I remember distinctly thinking, oh no, this is really, really bad. Panic set in. I looked around frantically for something, anything to help, but there were no towels in sight. Everything happened so fast that I wasn't even thinking straight. Fueled entirely by adrenaline, I walked out of the bathroom as casually as possible, keeping a straight face. The hotel worker was still there, finishing up the room. Without saying a word, I carefully closed the bathroom door behind me and left as quickly as I could. I should have said something. I could have warned him, but I just didn't. From his perspective, he was just doing his job when I walked in, made a huge mess, and left without a single word of explanation. I can't even imagine what went through his head when he later walked in to put fresh towels in the bathroom and found the floor completely covered in that. I went back upstairs to my room and never spoke about it to anyone. Story 12. Back when I was younger and a bit naive, I forgot to log out of my email account. This was before web-based email was common. Most of us used Telnet to check our messages. One day I was sitting in class, waiting for the lecture to start, human zoology of all classes, when my professor suddenly called my name and asked to speak with me. We stepped outside and she said, I got that picture you sent me. I was completely confused. What picture? I don't remember sending you anything. She explained that she had received an email from my account with a picture of some guy's, well, let's just say a very personal photo, accompanied by the message, here's my expletive for everyone to see. I was stunned. I had no idea what was going on. I assured her that I hadn't sent anything like that, and she seemed to believe me. She wasn't even mad, just confused. Later that day, I got a call from the student judiciary office. They told me I needed to come in immediately. Turns out it wasn't just my professor who had received the email. Every single faculty member, staff member, and student at the school had gotten it too. Luckily, they believed me when I said I had nothing to do with it. The only consequence was that they revoked my email access. Here's the worst part. A couple of years later, I needed that email account reinstated for a project. When I finally logged back in, I was met with hundreds of old messages. Buried among them was a copy of the email, the original one that had been sent out. I opened it. The photo attached, let's just say it was not flattering for the guy in the picture. I mean, I'm not going to claim I have anything special myself, but yikes. Fortunately, most students at the time didn't even use their school email accounts regularly, especially the engineering students. So hopefully not too many people saw it. Let's just say, bullet dodged. Story 13. I am a former heroin addict. Today I have 69 days clean. You asked for the most horrible thing I've ever done, and that's a tough one. But I think I have an answer that might be shocking enough. My mother used to pay me cash to pick up my 25-year-old autistic brother from his special education classes. The school was pretty far away, and she didn't know how to drive on the highway because it scared her. His school happened to border Paterson, New Jersey, the heroin capital of the state, and the place where I used to get my fix. One day I picked up my brother while going through withdrawal. I hadn't used anything in over a day, and the cold sweats were hitting me hard. My body ached and a deep chill ran through my spine. But this was nothing new to me. I was a junkie, a mess, a complete wreck. And without thinking twice, I drove into Patterson with my brother in the car, heading straight to the usual spot. I didn't even consider the fact that I was risking 2 lives now, not just my own. Any trip there was dangerous, whether from getting robbed by dealers or busted by the cops. And I wasn't exactly blending in. A young, privileged-looking guy driving a Honda Fit stood out in that neighborhood. I bought what I needed while my autistic brother sat in the car, completely unaware of what was happening. He has very severe autism and is unable to communicate, so he didn't understand anything about what I was doing. I still regret that day. I was used to risking my own life, but not others. And my brother, he didn't deserve that. That's my confession. Maybe it's darker than you expected, but it's the truth. Story 14. I was a counselor at a sleepaway camp, and one day I decided to put on a full-body green spandex suit just to run around and make the kids laugh. Later, I went to a hockey game where some of my campers were playing. While I was there, one of the younger kids figured out that it was me inside the green suit. He started tugging on my shorts, trying to pull them off. Those suits are tight, definitely not something you want to be seen in without extra layers. I played along, joking around with him, but at some point, in the middle of all the chaos, I accidentally hit him in the stomach. Hard. The poor kid immediately burst into tears. He was crying so loudly that they actually stopped the game to see what was going on. I panicked. Thinking fast, I picked him up and carried him back to the bunk, all while still in the green suit. Terrified of getting fired, I ended up paying him $30 to keep quiet about it. Luckily, since I was covered head to toe, nobody could tell it was me. Otherwise, I might not have been so lucky. Story 15. I'm way late to this, but this memory still makes me feel awful. When I was about 7 to 9 years old and my younger brother was around 5 to 7, my mom would sometimes buy us kids' cuisine meals for dinner. We loved them. Getting one felt like a special treat. One night, for some reason, I didn't like the specific meal she had picked. The pasta wasn't what I wanted, and instead of just dealing with it, I made a huge fuss. I refused to eat it and kept complaining about how terrible of a choice it was. That's when my mom started crying. She quietly left the table, unable to say anything. My dad just looked at me like he was wondering, what kind of spoiled brat have I raised? Here's the twist. My mom had multiple sclerosis, MS. She was likely exhausted that night, and that's why she had given us frozen dinners instead of cooking. I didn't realize it back then, but looking back, I can't help but feel like a complete jerk. I still cringe when I think about it. She was doing her best, and I was too young and selfish to see it. Story 16. When I was about 16, my friends and I were out getting high when we came up with what we thought was a hilarious idea: put a can of sardines in someone's car. The plan was simple. They'd get in, and the awful smell would hit them immediately. We thought it would be the funniest prank ever. We drove around for a while until we found a car parked outside a small office building. I got out, checked the door, and saw that it was unlocked. Without hesitation, I opened the can of sardines and smeared oily fish and tomato sauce all over the back seat. As I ran back to my friend's car, I glanced up at the office building and noticed that one of the lights was still on. Inside, I saw a woman, probably in her mid-30s to early 40s, vacuuming what looked like a law office. It was 1:30 in the morning. That's when it hit me. She wasn't some high-powered lawyer working late. She was a night cleaner, toiling away to make a living. And now, because of me, she was going to have to deal with the disgusting mess I had just made. I don't know whose car that was, but it could have been hers. Maybe it belonged to one of the lawyers she worked for, who would just yell at her for the smell when they found it. Either way, she was the one stuck in the middle of my stupid prank. I still feel terrible about it to this day. I can't believe I was the kind of person who could do something like that to someone just trying to get by. Story 17. When I was in middle school, I fell hard for my best friend's girlfriend. I thought she was perfect, and when they eventually broke up, I secretly hoped I'd have a chance with her. Instead, she friend-zoned me. Every time I logged onto AIM, she would message me to vent about how miserable she was without him. At first, I listened, trying to be supportive. But after a while, I got tired of hearing about how much she still loved him. One day, I finally snapped and told her how I felt. I naively believed that if she knew I loved her, she'd realize I could treat her better than my friend ever did. But of course, that didn't happen. She made it clear she didn't feel the same way, and in a panic, I played it off as a joke. The AIM conversations didn't stop, though. Over time, they became darker and more unsettling. She confided in me that her parents were abusive, but later admitted that her father had only slapped her once. She became obsessed with her weight, convinced that my friend had lost interest in her because she wasn't thin enough. She wasn't overweight at all. She even talked about making herself throw up. Then one night, she messaged me again. I don't know why I did it, but I responded with, "Hey, fatty." She never messaged me again. Now, years later, I heard she became a stripper. No joke. I don't know if what I said had anything to do with how things turned out for her, but I still regret it. I could have handled that moment so much better. Instead, I pushed her away in the worst way possible. Story 18. I realized at a young age that I was interested in girls. By the time I was 13, I confided in my best friend, and though she never mentioned being into girls, she was curious. That summer, we secretly dated, holding hands, kissing, writing love letters, though we both felt like it was something we had to hide. But when school started again, she didn't want to hide anymore. She wanted to be open about our relationship. She would try to hold my hand in the hallways, kiss me in front of people, and leave notes in my locker. I panicked. I was terrified someone would find out, so I shut her out completely. I ignored her for months, wouldn't talk to her, wouldn't look at her. Then one day she came up to me in class crying, holding a letter. In it, she wrote things like, "I miss you. I've never been happier than when I was with you. Please be mine again." I looked her in the eyes and ripped the letter up in front of her. She broke down in front of the whole class sobbing, and when people asked what had happened, I lied. I told them she was making everything up, that she was a liar, that nothing had ever happened. We're still Facebook friends, but we don't talk. She's moved on, living her own life. But sometimes I wonder what might have been different if I had been braver. Story 19. When my son was 18 months old, I took him grocery shopping. After loading the bags into the trunk, I placed him in his car seat and was about to buckle him in when my shopping cart started rolling away. I rushed to grab it, came back, finished putting the groceries in, and drove off. I forgot to buckle him in. As I was driving home, I was about to make a right turn into my bank. I heard him fiddling with the door handle. Some part of my mind knew that was odd. He shouldn't be able to reach it, but I brushed it off. Then as I made the turn, he opened the door and flew out of the car. I was going fast. I slammed on the brakes. A large pickup truck behind me did the same, barely stopping in time. They came within inches of hitting him. I ran to him expecting the worst. But he was sitting up, screaming. I checked him over. Not a single scratch. Somehow, he was completely fine. I picked him up, buckled him in properly this time, and drove off as traffic backed up behind me. I didn't want someone to call the cops on me. I pulled into an empty lot, took him out, and checked him again. He was walking around smiling like nothing had happened. I never told my wife, and I never intend to. Story 20. When I was young, my older sister asked me to get her a soda from the garage fridge. I didn't want to, but after an argument, my parents made me do it. Out of spite, I poured her half a drink, then topped the rest off with antifreeze. I stood there staring at it for a long time. Eventually, I came to my senses, dumped it out, and poured her a normal drink. But I still used the same cup, so I would know what I almost did. That wasn't the only thing. I melted her Barbie dolls' heads. I tried to sabotage her friendships. Years later, I got involved with a girl and slept with her without protection. She nearly got pregnant. I didn't care about her, not really. I treated her carefully, but without emotion. When she finally got her period, I distanced myself. She eventually broke down and told me she had written a poem about me, something deeply depressing. I talked her down from doing something drastic, but after that, we never spoke again. I've done a lot of things in relationships I regret. I had an affair with an older girl while her boyfriend was away in the army. When he found out, they broke up. She spiraled into depression, cut herself off from everyone, and disappeared from our lives. Years later, I heard she had a baby, not mine or his, but none of that was the worst thing I did. I had a great friend, someone who introduced me to a lot of good things. He was an orphan. His mom died of alcohol poisoning, and his dad overdosed on heart meds. But despite everything, he was always happy. A little weird, sure, but happy. In middle school, he got into drugs. Really into drugs. We drifted apart. Then ironically, I got into drugs when he was trying to get clean. His grandpa died, and his grandma kicked him out. He started running, got in shape, even started dating senior year. I was happy for him. Then one day, he called me up in a panic, saying he had made a huge mistake. He wouldn't explain over the phone. He just said he needed to show me. I met him by the bridge. He was jumpy, crying. He walked me over to a spot in the dirt, and that's when I saw it. His girlfriend. Or what was left of her. Blood everywhere. Her face was unrecognizable. The most gruesome thing I had ever seen. I threw up. He said they were setting off fireworks. He loved fireworks. But something went wrong. It went off in her face, and he didn't know what to do. I couldn't process it. I just shook my head, got in my car, and drove off. A few days later, she was reported missing. They found her body near the lake within a week. But something was strange. There was no missing persons report for him. His great-aunts, who were too old to notice much, only realized he was gone when a truancy officer showed up at their house. The police were quiet about the whole thing. No headlines, no news stories, nothing. And I never saw or heard from him again. Story 21. During college, I landed a summer internship at a local nonprofit. It was a great gig, and my boss was this laid-back hippie guy who lived way out on a farm. Despite his easygoing nature, he understood that sometimes guns were necessary on a farm for dealing with predators like wolves that threaten livestock. That summer, we had a 4th of July company party, and everyone, starting with my boss, got completely wasted. At some point in the night, he decided it would be a great idea to bring out some machine guns and let everyone fire into his pond. No harm, no foul, aside from the fact that we were all completely intoxicated and totally untrained in handling firearms. Being a redneck by background, he had zero concerns about letting me take my turn. Feeling extra reckless, I got even more drunk and went full Tony Montana on the pond, spraying bullets like a madman. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and a horrifying realization. I had gunned down a small family of beavers, the same beavers my boss had hand-raised and released back into the wild. I never told him. Story 22. One night I got really drunk at a bar. The next morning I woke up with a girl's number saved in my phone, but I had zero recollection of what she looked like. We started texting, and after a while we agreed to hang out. When I picked her up, she stepped out of her house and smiled. That's when I saw it. It was, without exaggeration, the worst case of crooked teeth I had ever seen. To be polite, I went through with the date. A couple of weeks later, I was having lunch with some friends when a girl sitting nearby smiled at us. My friends noticed her unfortunate dental situation, and we started joking about teeth in general. That's when I decided to tell them the story about the girl I had dated. One of my friends asked, "Was she hot though?" Without thinking, I responded, way too loudly, "She would be hot if her teeth weren't so messed up." The second I said it, I realized what I had done. The girl sitting nearby had heard everything. I looked at her, and she had the most horrified, crushed expression I have ever seen. I have never felt like a bigger jerk in my life. Story 23. I was in love with this girl for years. We had a connection, but the timing was never right. Eventually, she met a guy, someone about to join the army, and they got engaged. I told myself I understood, but deep down, I couldn't let that happen. So I waited. I made friends with him, hung out with them for months. I learned everything about his past, his messed up family, his struggles with addiction. He had been a heroin addict but had cleaned up his life. He swore he was done with that world forever, and he was joining the army to build a future for them both. Then one night, my opportunity came. He and the girl had a big fight, and he came over to a friend's house to blow off steam. We were drinking, and I brought out my bottle of OxyContin, something I had for a legitimate medical condition. I crushed up a pill, let a friend do a line, took one myself, and then made sure he saw the offer in front of him. I knew he would take it. Addicts always do. At first he resisted, so I rationalized it for him. Told him it was just one time, just one pill, one last flight before he went off to boot camp. He had been clean for so long, he could handle one. Eventually he caved. That one pill led to another, and another the next day I gave him 2 more. That was all it took. He spiraled, fell back into heroin, got disqualified from the army, and she left him. I was right there when she needed someone to cry on, and that night we hooked up. We dated for a month, then it ended. I don't know what happened to him. Story 24. This happened in middle school, before I apparently learned basic human interaction. A few of us were talking in class, including an old friend I had known since we were about 2 years old. She was a cheerleader, one of the strong girls at the bottom of the pyramid, the ones who do the real work. We were joking about something, I don't remember what, and I asked if it had gotten her kicked off the cheerleading team. It was game day, and she was wearing her uniform. She laughed and said, "Haha, yeah, I got kicked off the team." Then for some reason, my brain just completely failed me. I said something like, "Oh, was it because you guys were doing the pyramid and they dropped you and you left a 2-foot indentation in the concrete?" Why on earth did I say that? The moment the words left my mouth, I knew I had messed up. She started crying. Everyone else gave me death glares. I just stared at my desk for the next 20 minutes, completely ashamed. I don't know why I said it. She was always a friend. I felt awful then, and even 13 years later, I still feel like a complete jerk whenever I think about it. Story 25. When I was in elementary school, we used to play tag on these tall wooden play structures at recess. They seemed at least a story high at the top, with a metal slide and a bar above it. I was pretty active, and one day while playing tag, a kid was chasing me. I ran up the play structure and waited at the metal slide. Just as he was about to tag me, I jumped down onto the slide while grabbing the metal bar above it. I ended up doing a flip over the bar and landing hard on my knees. When I looked around, the kid was gone, so I just kept playing. Recess was stopped shortly after, and an ambulance arrived. Apparently, during my jump, the kid had tried to grab me but slipped off the structure. He hit his head on the metal slide, then on several of the wooden posts before landing on the pebble-covered ground. He was taken to the hospital, and not long after, he transferred schools. I never saw him again. Years later, when I visited my old elementary school, I learned that he had suffered severe brain damage from the fall and had been placed in a special needs school. Tragically, he passed away a few years later due to an infection. Story 26. I have a couple of experiences that aren't the worst, but they still sit in the back of my mind. When I was young in junior school, English system, a friend and I were messing around. Just the kind of dumb things kids do. For some reason, I bit his shoulder, like a vampire, God knows why. I didn't think I bit that hard, but he bruised easily, and maybe I misjudged. He ended up crying, with a massive bite-shaped mark on his shoulder, and ran straight to a teacher. I got a serious scolding and felt pretty bad about it. But that wasn't the worst. This next one definitely was. Again in junior school, we had a PE lesson, physical education. This one was special because an American instructor was visiting to teach us a little about American football. When he introduced himself, we were all standing in a line. He was a big guy, and I remember his name was Jerry. For context, I had grown up in a place where I hadn't been exposed to much diversity, so I wasn't used to seeing people of different backgrounds. But that's no excuse for what I said next. For some reason, I blurted out, "Can we call you Blackie?" The second it left my mouth, I realized how wrong it was. The room fell silent. The embarrassment, the guilt, it hit instantly. Even now, I still feel awful about it. Story 27. Man, I feel like a terrible person just thinking about this, but I also feel like telling a short story. This was before the days of MySpace and Facebook, before social media really took off. I started dating a girl from across the country whom I had met in some random chat room. We only communicated through instant messaging. She would share her poetry on some early blogging site and send me pictures of herself. This went on smoothly for a month or two, but at some point I started suspecting, correctly, that the pictures she sent me weren't actually of her, but of her friend. I had seen her friend's photo through a link on her blog, and it became obvious. Not wanting to be deceived any longer, I decided to make my exit in the most dramatic way I could think of. I pretended to be my own mother and told her I had tried to take my own life. I told her I was going to survive, but that she wouldn't be able to talk to me again because I had lost my memory. I blocked her screen name and moved on with my life. About 2 weeks later, she messaged me from a new screen name. "OMG, are you okay?" Great, now I had to keep up the lie. So I responded as my mom again, telling her I was still recovering. I went on a rant about how I had left notes mentioning her and that it was all her fault. She apologized over and over, but I just kept piling on the guilt with whatever hurtful things my 14-year-old brain could come up with. She eventually snapped, called me a terrible person, and said I didn't understand true love. Then I blocked her again. Another month passed and she messaged me from yet another new screen name. This time I didn't pretend to be my mom. I pretended to be a new version of myself with no memory of her. That kicked off months of her desperately trying to make me remember how much we had loved each other. She pleaded with me, writing things like, "Baby, just try to. Remember us." I strung her along, pretending to have occasional breakthroughs, only to forget her again the next time we talked. I kept this up purely for my own amusement, knowing I was breaking her heart little by little. Eventually, I got bored of the game, changed my screen name, and disappeared. Sometimes I wonder what else I could have done to mess with her more, but honestly, I think I did enough damage. Story 28. When I was about 8 years old, I was a church-going Cub Scout. There was this one kid at church who acted like he could do anything he wanted because, as he constantly reminded everyone, "My big brother can beat you up." I got sick of hearing it, so I finally told him I'd beat up both him and his brother. He took that challenge seriously and set up a fight, at church of all places. He brought his big brother into this open atrium area, acting like he had something important to show him. The problem? The older brother had no idea what was about to happen. The second he stepped in, I didn't hesitate. I swung with everything I had and nearly broke his nose. Blood went everywhere. Turns out the little instigator hadn't bothered to tell his brother what was going on. The older brother had walked into the situation completely unaware. The kid who set this all up ran crying to his parents. When I explained what had happened, he got the worst punishment out of everyone. Story 29. I was always the calm, quiet kid, the type who kept to himself and only spoke when spoken to. But one day that changed. My father and stepmother had gotten into another one of their heated arguments. By that point, they had been together for years, and I had grown used to these fights. Like usual, I turned on some music and waited for it to pass. But something must have been simmering beneath the surface because, this time, things took a turn. I distinctly heard my stepmother make some nasty comments about my biological mother. And that was it. I threw open my door and forced my way into their argument. Before I knew it, I was shouting every possible insult I could think of at her. I called her a disgrace, an incompetent and useless mother, and a complete waste of a human being. As an afterthought, I even added that her cooking tasted like something you'd scrape off a sidewalk. The room went dead silent. My dad and stepmother just stared at me in shock. I guess seeing the usually quiet stepson explode in a fury of insults caught them off guard. The only thing my stepmother could muster was a weak, "Fine, screw you." My dad quickly stepped in, pushed me back toward my room, and told me to stay inside. From behind the door, I could hear her still raging, yelling at my dad, "I can't believe your son called me a disgrace." That was years ago, but it left a lasting impact on my relationship with her, if you can even call it that. We don't talk, we don't interact, and we barely even acknowledge each other. She must have also taken my comment about her cooking seriously because apparently she doesn't cook much for anyone anymore. Story 30. The time I felt the worst after making a stand was when I caught a woman aggressively handling her tiny chihuahua on the street. She was choking and slapping the poor thing, screaming at it to be quiet and behave. Now, I'm not some hardcore animal rights activist. I don't usually get involved in things like that, but seeing a grown woman towering over a tiny defenseless creature while screaming at it just didn't sit right with me. So I turned and told her to stop. I said she was doing something wrong and needed to stop hitting the dog. That's when things escalated. She stormed up to me, yelling that it was none of my business how she treated her pet. But what shocked me more was that other people around us started siding with her. Some random guy came up to me and said, "Are you an animal behaviorist? Are you a police officer? Is this any of your business?" I couldn't believe it. I was standing in the middle of a crowd, being berated for trying to defend something that couldn't defend itself. Somehow I had become the bad guy for speaking up. To this day, I'm still outraged when I think about it. Apparently in New Westminster, British Columbia, people are perfectly fine looking the other way when someone mistreats an animal right in front of them. Story 31. I was about to leave for military basic training. I was scared, and for some reason, I felt the need to be with as many women as possible. Maybe because I thought I might never come back. I started flirting with a girl who had always just been a friend. She had a boyfriend, but I didn't care since I didn't know him. After a few weeks of intense flirting, she ended up breaking up with him. The night before I left, I was saying goodbye to all my friends. When I said goodbye to her, she leaned in for a kiss, but I turned away. I told her I didn't want to start anything when I was leaving the next day. The worst part of this story is what happened after. Apparently, her ex-boyfriend didn't take the breakup well. His life spiraled downhill, and about a year later, he took his own life. I heard that he dressed in a suit, walked out to the middle of an orchard, overdosed, and left a suicide note. I'll never know if my actions played a role in what happened to him. Maybe his struggles ran much deeper than just losing a girlfriend, and he would have made the same decision regardless. But to this day, I can't shake the feeling that, in some way, I contributed to it. Story 32. I don't remember exactly how old I was, but I was definitely old enough to know better. I had been in a fight with my mom, and as punishment, she sent me to bed early. I went into the bathroom to take a shower, as I always did before bed, and locked the door. Then in a moment of pure immaturity, I decided to pretend to fall in the shower and scream in pain, expecting her to panic or break down. Looking back, I hate myself for it. She didn't hesitate. She broke down the door and even part of the wall to get to me. When she found me unharmed, I quickly pretended that I had actually slipped and just forgot that I had locked the door, trying to avoid getting in more trouble. Karma caught up with me a few years later. That time I actually did fall in the shower. I blacked out and woke up to my mom carrying me to the hospital. I guess I had been bleeding pretty badly. Another time, after a fight about homework, I drew a picture of her holding a smoking gun while I lay on the floor with a gunshot wound, bleeding. In the drawing, she had a speech bubble that said, "I don't care if you're dying, do your homework." She actually kept that picture and showed it to me years later. We laughed about it. "I love you, Mom. I was a real piece of work as a kid." Story 33. My parents divorced when I was young. My dad remarried, and he and my stepmom had 2 daughters. I would visit them during the summer. One of the activities we always did was play outside with water guns. Since my stepsisters lived there permanently, one year they got brand new super soakers. At the time, those things were expensive, and I wasn't given one because, as my dad put it, "You don't live here. Your mom would have to get one for you." So while they ran around with their high-powered water guns, I was stuck with a tiny, weak one. It was completely unfair. I was a few years older than my oldest stepsister, and she was 3 years older than the youngest. I was faster, more strategic, and, well, I had one other advantage. I was a boy, and that meant I could aim. At some point, I had enough of being outmatched. I managed to hide long enough to use my secret weapon. I peed into my water gun, then I topped it off with water to dilute it and went back into battle. From that point on, the game became much more enjoyable for me. My stepsisters kept celebrating their so-called victories, but I was pretty sure they had no idea they were losing in a much bigger way. Story 34. When I was 18 or 19, I was seeing this girl named Pam. She was a really cool person, worked as a projectionist at an indie theater, had unique taste in music, and was just fun to be around. One night, after a few house parties, we ended up back at my apartment. We sat on the couch watching TV for maybe 5 minutes before things started heating up. But just as we were making out, I suddenly tasted salt. She was crying. She told me not to worry, saying it was just some past stuff coming back to her. But I pressed, and eventually she told me the truth. When she was very young, she had been abused by her father. Sometimes when she drank, those memories resurfaced. We spent the rest of the night just talking. Eventually, we fell asleep next to each other. The next morning, she was up before me making breakfast. She seemed relieved to have finally shared that part of her past. We ate, cuddled on the couch, and before long, things started getting intimate again. But something was wrong. I wasn't feeling anything. No attraction, no arousal, nothing. She noticed. After a while, she hesitated and asked, "Is it because of what I told you last night?" "I'm sorry. It wasn't my fault. He made me," I quickly reassured her. I told her she had nothing to apologize for, that if her father weren't already dead, I'd want to kill him myself. But the truth was, something inside me had changed. The attraction was gone. We never slept together again. 2 weeks later, we were in bed, both naked, when she asked again, "Why?" And without thinking, the words just slipped out. "All I can think of you as now is a victim. I want to feel sorry for you, not be with you." She ran out, getting dressed as she left, screaming at me while I tried to apologize, but it was too late. If there's a hell, I guess I'll see you there. Story 35. I don't know if this is the worst thing I've ever done, but it's definitely what I feel the worst about. I'm 3 years older than my little brother, and growing up, I was always bigger than him. We were really close, but I was also a total jerk to him. I was condescending, selfish, and I'd beat him up over the smallest things. Despite that, we still stayed friends, but looking back, I wouldn't have wanted a friend like me. I made him cry more times than I can count. Around my 14th birthday, I started making friends my own age. My little brother still wanted to hang out with me, but as soon as I found my own group, I pushed him aside. I ignored him completely, and when he tried to tag along, I treated him even worse. I'd beat him up in front of my friends just for trying to be around us. Then I started disappearing, getting into drugs and throwing away any close relationship I had with my family. Meanwhile, my little brother had no friends. He was quiet, nerdy, and completely alone. I could tell how much it hurt him, but I never cared enough to do anything about it. I was too busy doing my thing. Then he tried to take his own life. That was the moment I realized just how much pain he was in. I can't even describe how much it scared me. From that day on, I promised myself I would stop being such a terrible brother. I saw how much our friendship meant to him, how much he needed me, and on some level, how much I needed him too. He's doing much better now. I'm 21, he just turned 18, and he has a great girlfriend. Now, ironically, I'm the one without many friends. But we're closer than ever. He's probably my best friend. I still feel awful about the way I treated him, and I try every day to make it up to him. I know what it feels like to be bullied, to have no one, to feel alone. When I went through that, at least I had him. When he went through it, I wasn't there. I was just another bully in his life. Story 36. I've never told anyone this before. When I was 14, I wasn't exactly well liked. I had some friends, but I wasn't one of the popular kids. And, like in every school, there were bullies. One in particular made my life hell. Let's call him Billy. For whatever reason, Billy had it out for me. He tormented me every day, broke into my locker, stole my books, sabotaged me whenever I tried to talk to girls. He made sure my life was miserable. He was a known thief too. Teachers, the gym, the nurse's office. He stole from everyone, but somehow he was never caught. One day I had enough. I spread a rumor that my mom had just sold some antiques my late grandmother had left us. I made sure people heard that we had thousands of dollars in cash sitting at home. I knew Billy would come for it. I waited for weeks, nothing happened. Then one day he finally took the bait. I left the back patio door unlocked. By mistake. I knew he would go straight to my parents' bedroom, thinking that's where the money was. I was waiting for him there. When he opened the door, I confronted him with my dad's old revolver. I shot him 5 times in the chest. Afterwards, I called my parents first, then the police. I had practiced my story over and over while I waited for him. When the cops arrived, I told them I had heard an intruder, panicked, and ran to my parents' room where I found the gun. When the door opened, I was scared for my life. I didn't realize it was Billy until after I had pulled the trigger. I was questioned for hours. My parents were forced to put me in therapy to cope with what I had done. My school found out, and suddenly, people saw me differently. There was sympathy. People wanted to be around me. For the first time, I wasn't bullied. People wanted to hang out with the kid who killed someone in self-defense. And honestly, I didn't care why they wanted to be my friend. I was just glad I wasn't alone anymore. Story 37. In 6th grade, there was one kid in our class who everyone picked on. The big gag at the time was trying to tie his backpack, one of those with elastic bands for securing items, to his chair. Everyone had tried for a long time, but no one had ever actually pulled it off. One day, just as we were about to leave, I finally succeeded. I tied his bag to the chair without him noticing. When he stood up, the chair came with him, and he fell straight to the floor. The entire class burst out laughing. Our teacher, however, wasn't amused. He made everyone write down if they had seen who did it. My classmates promised they wouldn't snitch, but I felt so guilty that I wrote, "It was me, bail bondsman." The next day, my teacher asked to see me after class. But before he could say anything, I blurted out, "I realize what I did was wrong. I apologize to him. I feel terrible, and I'll accept any punishment you want to give me." He never mentioned it again. But the worst part? The next day, his mom had cut off all the elastic bands from his bag. That meant he had gone home, told her what happened, and she thought it was serious enough to do something about it. That part has stuck with me ever since. Story 38. When I was little, we had a crossing guard who was mentally handicapped. I never knew exactly what condition he had, but he spoke slowly, slurred his words a little, and was just a really kind man. But kids can be cruel. My friends and I used to throw pine cones at him, laugh at him, and make fun of him. We thought it was harmless fun, until one day he had enough. He reported me to the school. I got in big trouble. My parents had to pick me up, and I was suspended. When we got home for the first time in my life, my dad actually hit me. I felt awful, not just because I had been so cruel to that man, but because I also didn't think my dad had the right to be that angry. In my childish mind, I convinced myself that if he was going to treat me that way, I would make him regret it. I decided I would make him think he had killed me. I took a bike chain and wrapped it around my neck in a way that would tighten when pulled. I attached it to the headboard of my bed, threw a blanket over myself, and let my feet dangle out. That day, my family was going out, and they kept calling for me to get ready. When I didn't respond, my dad stormed into my room. He grabbed my feet and started yanking, getting angrier each time I didn't move. With every pull, the chain got tighter. Finally, he ripped the blanket off, and I'll never forget the look of horror on his face. I was lying there, my skin turning purple, the chain wrapped around my neck. They rushed to remove it. My mom broke down in hysterics. My dad didn't speak to me for days. That was probably the worst thing I've ever done. Story 39. I went to a high school outside of my district, while my good friend attended the one closest to where we lived. He had to attend a night program designed to help students catch up on missing work or get tutoring before failing a class. That night, there were 3 of us. We brought a bag of paintballs along for the visit. When my friend got to the classroom, he immediately handed his assignments over to someone else to do while we waited. Once he got the completed work back and turned it in, we started wandering around the school. We went into random classrooms, pelting computer screens with paintballs. We grabbed attendance books and threw student seating cards all over the floors, scattering them across multiple rooms. As we made our way toward an exit, we reached a handicap ramp, and for no reason other than sheer stupidity, I grabbed a fire extinguisher and hosed it down. The next day, the whole thing was all over the local news. The school shut down the program entirely, leaving a lot of students without the extra help they needed to pass their classes. I laid low after that. Story 40. During my junior year of high school, some friends and I decided to go mailboxing, basically smashing or destroying mailboxes for fun. Since it was summer and close to the 4th of July, I had some fireworks. I had always been known as the fireworks guy because my dad bought them wholesale and resold them. We drove around town and eventually we came to a girl's house, a girl we all used to make fun of. I decided to go all out. I had a massive firecracker, one that was easily as powerful as a quarter stick of dynamite. I placed it inside her mailbox, lit the fuse, and sprinted back to the car. Just as we sped off, a second car turned the corner. We didn't stick around to see the aftermath. The next day at school, some other friends casually mentioned that they saw the girl's mailbox explode. She wasn't at school that day. When she finally came back, she was covered in bandages, her arms covered in scars. That's when I found out what had happened. Apparently, she had figured out that her mailbox had been targeted because of her. She had already been struggling, and that night, after seeing the destruction, she hurt herself, cut too deep, and almost didn't survive. She was never the same after that. I still can't describe the feeling I had when I found out. Horrendous. Story 41. I don't usually post on Reddit because I never feel like I can relate to most of the stuff people talk about. But when I saw this topic, I immediately thought of something from my childhood. Back in 3rd grade, I was playing Foursquare during recess. There were 3 other kids playing, and they all ganged up on me because they wanted their friend to take my spot. I held my ground for a while, but eventually I lost. Frustrated, I walked away and looked for someone else to play with. Nearby, there was an Indian kid playing by himself, so I asked if he wanted to play 2 square with me. He agreed. That's when things got worse. He kept beating me over and over, and then he started making fun of me. He threw insults my way, and my temper got the best of me. In a moment of anger, I yelled something stupid. "Shut up, you applehead!" mocking the shape of his turban. But he didn't stop. Without thinking, I ran up to him, grabbed his turban, and yanked as hard as I could. It came off in my hands, and his long hair spilled down to his knees. I panicked and ran straight to the bathroom, where I threw his turban into the urinal. I got in a ton of trouble for that. Later that year, after everything settled down, I apologized to him, and surprisingly, we became friends. He was actually a really nice kid, but instead of just appreciating the friendship, I did something even worse. He was an only child and his parents weren't home much, so they spoiled him with everything. PlayStation, N64, Sega Saturn. You name it, he had it. I took full advantage of that. One day he showed me his Pokemon card collection. He had 6 Charizard cards. At the time, those were worth everything. So I waited for the right moment, then stole 4 of them and stopped talking to him after that. Looking back, I was a complete scumbag in 4th grade. Story 42. When I was in middle school, my younger brother was in elementary school. He acted very feminine, and at the time, I didn't handle it well. I was dealing with my own issues. I was unhappy, a little depressed, and the only way I seemed to feel better was by making someone else feel worse. I never bullied anyone at school because I had seen kids get picked on and didn't want to be part of that. But when I got home, it was a different story. I took everything out on my brother. I called him names, insulted him, and told him things like, "When you get to high school, you're screwed. People are going to kick the crap out of you." Looking back, I think part of me was ashamed of how he acted. But mostly I was just being an awful person because I didn't know how to deal with my own problems. My parents punished me every time they caught me, grounding me, yelling at me. But instead of accepting that I deserved it, I just blamed my brother. It became a cycle. I bullied him, got punished, got angrier, and bullied him even more. This went on for about 2 years. Fast forward to now, 5 years later. My brother has come out and has a boyfriend. We both changed a lot. Surprisingly, we get along really well now. I've grown up, and I'm not just accepting of who he is. I support him fully, but I've never apologized to him. I've never sat him down and told him how sorry I am for the way I treated him. I think about it a lot. I don't know if he even remembers it the way I do, but if I were him, I wouldn't have forgiven me. Story 43. About a year ago, a few friends and I went camping, or more accurately, drinking ourselves into oblivion in a tent somewhere far away to celebrate a friend's birthday. None of us could have predicted how badly things would go. We drove around for a while, looking for the perfect spot. This was in Iceland, and for those who don't know, outside of Reykjavik, the country is mostly vast, empty landscapes, abandoned farms, and tiny villages scattered across the wilderness. It's desolate, but beautiful. Eventually, we found what we thought was an abandoned farm near a grassy hill in a deep fjord. It seemed like the perfect place to camp. We set up our tents, started drinking, and got completely wasted. There may have been some other substances involved. You know how it goes. Drunk people do stupid things. This was one of those times. At some point, we found an old tool shed, and since there were no toilets around, decided to use it as a bathroom. By the end of the night, the entire shed was filled with filth. Then we found some wheelbarrows, destroyed them, and used them as a fire pit. The fire got out of control and burned part of the field we were camping on. For reasons I still don't understand, one of us had brought a firefighting axe. Don't ask me why. We decided to use it to break into the abandoned farm. In Iceland, breaking into abandoned buildings is kind of a thing. It's not considered a serious crime, more like urban exploring. So without thinking, we took the axe and smashed the front door open. The second we stepped inside, we realized our mistake. There were beds with clean sheets. A TV was on. A fridge was stocked with fresh salmon. This wasn't an abandoned farm. We had just broken into someone's actual home. We panicked, but being as drunk as we were, we didn't care enough to leave. We just kept partying. A few hours later, the owner came home. An elderly man walked in to find a group of drunk strangers in his house. His front door destroyed with an axe, tents and trash littering his backyard, his tool shed ruined with filth, and his lawn burnt from the fire. He was devastated. Of course, he called the police. They showed up and started interrogating us. And here's where things get truly awful. We managed to talk our way out of it. We told them we had just arrived and found the place already trashed. We even said we had stopped to help clean up. Somehow they believed us. No fines, no charges, no consequences. We drove away as free men. To this day, I still feel awful about it. We were absolute bastards.